Marcus and Michael Johnson stood outside the glass doors of Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. The two 16-year-old twins looked exactly the same with their dark skin and nervous expressions. Their mother had dropped them off 10 minutes ago, but they were still standing on the sidewalk trying to build up courage to go inside. Through the windows, they could see people in white uniforms practicing kicks and punches. Some students were moving fast and smooth like dancers. Others were breaking wooden boards with their bare hands. The sound of feet hitting punching bags echoed through the walls. Marcus adjusted his backpack strap and looked at his brother. Michael was biting his lip, which he always did when he was worried. They had moved to this new town just 2 weeks ago, and their mother thought martial arts would help them make friends and stay out of trouble. The truth was that Marcus and Michael preferred staying home reading books or playing video games. They were not athletic kids and had never been in any sports teams. At their old schools, they were known as the quiet, smart kids who never caused problems and never got into fights. What nobody knew was that these two seemingly weak teenagers had been training in secret for 5 years. Their grandfather, Robert Johnson, was a former soldier who had taught special forces how to fight. Every summer when they visited him, he would take them to his basement gym and teach them deadly fighting techniques. Grandpa Johnson had made them promise never to tell anyone about their training. He said real fighters never bragged about their skills and only used violence when they had no other choice. The twins had learned boxing, wrestling, and street fighting moves that could disable grown men in seconds. But looking at them, now standing nervously outside the dojo, nobody would ever guess they were dangerous. Marcus was tall and skinny with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Michael was exactly the same height and build, but he wore his hair slightly longer. Both boys looked like they would run away from any real fight. Finally, Marcus pushed open the glass door, and they walked inside together. The smell of sweat and rubber mats filled their noses. A man in his 50s wearing a black belt around his white uniform approached them with a smile. This was Sensei Williams, the head instructor. He had kind eyes and spoke in a calm voice that made the twins feel a little more relaxed. He asked about their experience, and when they said they were complete beginners, he nodded and pointed toward a group of younger students practicing basic moves. As Sensei Williams led them across the room, Marcus noticed 3 older teenagers watching them from the advanced section. These boys were wearing black belts and had muscular builds that came from years of training. The way they looked at the twins was not friendly. The first boy was Derek, who stood almost 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and arms covered in muscle. His black hair was cut short, and his dark eyes followed the twins as they walked past. He whispered something to his friends, and they all started laughing. Anthony was slightly shorter, but even more muscular than Derek. He had been training at this dojo for 4 years and thought he was the toughest fighter in the school. Carlos was the third member of their group. He was known for his quick kicks and bad temper. These 3 black belts had been the top students for years. They were used to being respected and feared by everyone else in the dojo. New students usually looked up to them and asked for advice, but something about Marcus and Michael annoyed them right away. Maybe it was because the twins did not seem impressed by their black belts. Maybe it was because they did not ask for autographs or try to become friends. The twins just quietly joined the beginner class and started learning basic stances. During their first lesson, Marcus and Michael struggled with simple kicks and punches. Their movements looked awkward and uncoordinated. Other beginners were doing better than them, which made Derek and his friends laugh even more. From across the room, the 3 black belts made jokes about the soft city boys who probably cried when they got hit. They called them easy targets and said they would probably quit after 1 week of real training. What Derek, Anthony, and Carlos did not know was that Marcus and Michael were only pretending to be clumsy. Their grandfather had taught them to hide their skills until the right moment. He said smart fighters always let their enemies underestimate them. As the class ended and students started changing clothes, the twins could feel hostile eyes watching them. They knew trouble was coming, but they were not afraid. 5 years of secret training had prepared them for situations like this. The Johnson twins were about to learn that their new dojo was not the safe place their mother had hoped it would be. But Derek and his friends were about to learn something much more dangerous about the quiet newcomers they thought would be easy victims. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus and Michael started training at Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. The twins came to every class on time and practiced quietly in the corner with the other beginners. They still looked clumsy when doing basic kicks and punches, but they never complained or gave up. Derek had been watching them carefully during every session. Something about these new students bothered him more each day. Most beginners either quit after a few hard lessons, or they tried to impress the black belts by asking questions and seeking attention. But Marcus and Michael just kept to themselves and focused on their training. After Tuesday evening class, Derek decided it was time to send a clear message. He waited until most students had left the building, then cornered Marcus in the locker room. Michael was still on the mat helping Sensei Williams put away equipment, so Marcus was alone and vulnerable. Derek stood in the doorway blocking the only exit. At nearly 6 feet tall with his black belt tied around his waist, he looked intimidating and powerful. His muscular arms were crossed, and his face showed no emotion as he stared down at Marcus, who was sitting on a bench tying his shoes. "You do not belong here," Derek said in a low, threatening voice. "This dojo is for real fighters, not soft boys who play video games all day." Marcus looked up calmly and continued tying his shoelaces. He did not seem afraid, which made Derek even more angry. Derek stepped closer until he was standing right over Marcus. The smell of his sweat and the sound of his heavy breathing filled the small space between the lockers. "You think you can just walk in here and take up space in our classes," Derek continued. "We have been training for years to earn our place, and you show up acting like you deserve respect." Marcus finished with his shoes and stood up slowly. Even though Derek was taller, Marcus did not back down or look away. His grandfather had taught him that showing fear only made bullies more aggressive. Instead, Marcus kept his hands relaxed at his sides and his breathing steady and calm. Before Derek could say anything else, Anthony and Carlos walked into the locker room. They had been waiting outside and came in when they heard Derek raising his voice. The 3 black belts now surrounded Marcus in a triangle formation, blocking any chance of escape. Anthony was shorter than Derek, but his muscles were even bigger from years of weightlifting and martial arts training. He cracked his knuckles loudly and smiled in a way that was not friendly at all. Carlos stood by the lockers, bouncing on his toes, like he was ready to start fighting right away. "Listen carefully," Anthony said, stepping closer to Marcus. "We run this dojo, and we decide who gets to stay and who needs to leave. You and your brother are making everyone uncomfortable with your pathetic attempts at martial arts. It would be better for everyone if you just quit now and found a different hobby." Marcus remained perfectly still, but his eyes were calculating distances and angles. His grandfather had taught him that the most dangerous moment in any confrontation was when multiple opponents thought they had you trapped. That was when people got overconfident and made mistakes. Carlos reached out to grab Marcus by the shirt, but just then Michael appeared in the doorway. The 3 black belts immediately stepped back and tried to look innocent. They did not want Sensei Williams to see what was happening and get them in trouble. Michael looked at his brother and could tell from Marcus' expression that something serious had just occurred. The twins had developed a way of communicating without words after years of being together. Michael knew that Derek and his friends had just made their first real threat. Derek brushed past Michael on his way out of the locker room, making sure to bump into him hard with his shoulder. As he walked away, he whispered just loud enough for both twins to hear, "This is not over. You have 1 week to quit voluntarily, or we will make you quit the hard way." Anthony and Carlos followed Derek out, leaving the twins alone in the locker room. Marcus and Michael looked at each other without speaking for several seconds. They both understood that their peaceful time at the dojo was about to end. The twins had hoped they could just attend classes and learn discipline without any drama. Their mother wanted them to make friends and stay out of trouble, but Derek and his friends were not going to let that happen. They saw the twins as weak targets who could be easily intimidated. What Derek, Anthony, and Carlos did not realize was that they had just threatened two of the most dangerous teenagers in the entire city. Marcus and Michael had been trained by a former Special Forces instructor who had taught them to disable armed adults in seconds. But the twins also remembered their grandfather's most important lesson. Real strength was knowing when not to fight. They would try to avoid violence for as long as possible. However, if Derek and his friends kept pushing, they would discover that the quiet Johnson twins were not the helpless victims they appeared to be. The following week brought more trouble for Marcus and Michael. Derek had decided that threatening them in the locker room was not enough. He wanted to hurt them publicly during class, where everyone could see what happened to students who did not show proper respect to the black belts. During Wednesday sparring practice, Derek walked over to where Sensei Williams was pairing up students for controlled fighting exercises. The instructor was matching people of similar skill levels, so nobody would get seriously injured during practice. Sensei Williams, Derek said in his most respectful voice, "I think it would be educational if I worked with one of the new students today. I could help teach them some advanced techniques and show them what real karate looks like." The instructor thought this was a good idea. Derek was one of his most experienced students and could probably teach the beginners some valuable lessons. He nodded and pointed toward Marcus, who was stretching in the corner. "Marcus, you will spar with Derek today," Sensei Williams announced. "This will be a great opportunity to learn from someone with years of experience. Remember, this is practice, so keep your techniques controlled and focus on learning rather than winning." Derek smiled as he walked over to Marcus, but his smile was cold and mean. He had been planning this moment all week and was excited to finally teach the quiet newcomer a painful lesson in front of the entire class. As they put on their protective gear, Derek whispered threats that only Marcus could hear. "I am going to break your ribs and make you cry like a baby," he said. "When I am done with you, everyone will know that you do not belong in this dojo." Marcus said nothing as he adjusted his headgear and mouthpiece. His grandfather had taught him that talking during a fight was a waste of energy that should be used for more important things. He also knew that angry fighters made more mistakes than calm ones. When Sensei Williams gave the signal to begin, Derek immediately launched a vicious attack. His first kick was aimed at Marcus' ribs with enough power to crack bones. This was not the controlled sparring that was supposed to happen during practice. Derek was trying to seriously hurt his opponent. But something strange happened when Derek's kick reached its target. Marcus seemed to melt away from the strike like smoke disappearing in the wind. The powerful kick hit nothing but air, and Derek stumbled forward off balance from his own momentum. Marcus had moved just enough to avoid the kick without making it obvious that he was much faster than he appeared. To everyone watching, it looked like Derek had simply missed his target. But Derek knew something was wrong. His kick should have connected easily against such a slow beginner. Derek tried again with a combination of punches aimed at Marcus' head and body. Each strike was thrown with full power and bad intentions. Derek wanted to knock Marcus unconscious in front of everyone and prove his dominance over the new students. Again, Marcus seemed to flow around the attacks like water moving around rocks. He never moved more than necessary and never struck back. He just defended himself while making Derek look clumsy and wild. The other students started to notice that something unusual was happening. Anthony was paired with Michael on the other side of the room and was having similar problems. He grabbed Michael and tried to throw him to the ground using a technique that had worked against dozens of other opponents. But Michael somehow landed safely and rolled back to his feet before Anthony could follow up with more attacks. Every time Anthony threw Michael down, the smaller boy would pop back up unhurt and ready to continue. It was like trying to fight a rubber ball that bounced back, no matter how hard you hit it. Anthony was getting frustrated and started using more force than was allowed in practice. Sensei Williams was watching both matches but did not realize what was really happening. He saw Derek and Anthony working hard against the beginners and thought his black belts were being good teachers. The instructor could not see that his top students were actually trying to injure their opponents. Marcus continued to avoid Derek's increasingly wild attacks. Each missed strike made Derek angrier and more reckless. Sweat was pouring down his face, and his breathing was getting heavy from throwing so many powerful techniques that hit nothing but air. The other students were starting to whisper among themselves. They could see that Derek was getting tired while Marcus still looked fresh and calm. Some of the more experienced fighters began to suspect that the new student was much better than he appeared. Michael was having the same effect on Anthony. No matter how hard the muscular black belt tried, he could not land a clean hit or keep Michael on the ground. The quiet beginner seemed to know exactly where every attack was coming from and how to neutralize it without fighting back. As the sparring session continued, Derek and Anthony became more desperate. They had expected easy victories over weak opponents, but instead found themselves struggling against fighters who seemed impossible to hurt. Their reputations as the toughest students in the dojo were being damaged in front of everyone. When Sensei Williams finally called time, both black belts were exhausted and frustrated. Marcus and Michael bowed respectfully and thanked their opponents for the good practice. They showed no signs of being tired or injured despite absorbing what should have been devastating attacks. Derek and Anthony knew that something was very wrong. These beginners were not normal students. They moved like experienced fighters who were only pretending to be weak. But neither black belt wanted to admit that they had failed to defeat supposed beginners in front of the entire class. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus and Michael started at Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos were getting more frustrated every day. Their attempts to intimidate and hurt the twins during regular classes had all failed. The quiet brothers seemed impossible to break or defeat. Derek had tried everything he could think of during sparring sessions. He threw his hardest kicks and punches, but Marcus always seemed to slip away at the last second. Anthony had the same problem with Michael, who moved like he could predict every attack before it happened. The 3 black belts were starting to look bad in front of the other students. People were whispering that maybe Derek and Anthony were not as tough as everyone thought. Some of the younger students even started asking the twins for advice on how to defend themselves so well. This was more than Derek could handle. He had been the top fighter at the dojo for 3 years and was not going to let 2 skinny newcomers destroy his reputation. If he could not beat them during regular class, then he would have to find another way to teach them respect. After Thursday evening practice, Derek waited in the parking lot with Anthony and Carlos. They hid behind a large van and watched as students left the building one by one. Finally, they saw Marcus and Michael walking toward the bus stop at the far end of the parking lot. The 3 black belts followed quietly, staying in the shadows between parked cars. There were no street lights in this part of the lot, and no other people around. This was the perfect place to have a private conversation with the twins about their future at the dojo. Derek stepped out first, blocking the path to the bus stop. Anthony and Carlos moved to flank the twins, cutting off any chance of escape. The brothers found themselves surrounded in a triangle formation with nowhere to run. "You two have been causing us problems for too long," Derek said in a threatening voice. "We tried to be nice and give you chances to quit voluntarily, but you did not listen. Now we have to do this the hard way." Anthony pulled a wooden practice sword from his equipment bag. The weapon was heavy and could easily break bones if used with full force. He swung it through the air, making whooshing sounds that echoed off the nearby cars. Carlos cracked his knuckles and bounced on his toes like he was getting ready for a real fight. His eyes were bright with excitement at the thought of finally hurting the twins who had embarrassed him during sparring practice. Marcus and Michael stood back to back in the center of the triangle. To anyone watching, they looked scared and helpless, surrounded by 3 bigger opponents with weapons. Their hands hung loose at their sides, and they seemed frozen with fear. What the black belts did not know was that this was exactly the situation the twins had been trained for. Their grandfather had spent years teaching them how to fight multiple armed opponents in close quarters. Every summer they had practiced scenarios just like this one. The twins were not scared. They were calculating. Marcus was measuring distances and angles while Michael was timing the breathing patterns of their opponents. Both brothers were ready to explode into action, but they waited for the perfect moment. Derek made the first mistake by getting too close. He wanted to grab Marcus by the shirt and throw him against a nearby car. But as his hand reached forward, something incredible happened that none of the black belts were prepared for. Marcus moved faster than any human should be able to move. His hand shot out like lightning and struck 3 pressure points on Derek's arm and shoulder. The black belt screamed and dropped to his knees, clutching his arm, which had gone completely numb. At the same exact moment, Michael spun around and disarmed Anthony of his wooden sword with a move so smooth it looked like magic. The weapon flew through the air and clattered against a car 20 feet away. Anthony stood there with his mouth open, staring at his empty hands. Carlos tried to punch Michael in the back of the head, but found himself grabbing nothing but air. Michael had somehow moved behind him and was now applying a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. Carlos struggled for a few seconds, then went limp and fell unconscious to the ground. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Derek was still on his knees, unable to move his arm. Anthony was backing away in terror, not understanding how he had been disarmed so easily. Carlos was unconscious and would stay that way for several minutes. Derek stared at his useless arm in complete shock. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if Marcus had turned off all the nerves and muscles with just a simple touch. He tried to move his fingers, but nothing happened. His arm hung limp and dead at his side. "How did you do that?" Derek whispered, looking up at Marcus with fear and confusion. 3 weeks ago, you could barely throw a basic punch. Now you just disabled me with one move that I have never seen before. Marcus looked down at Derek without any emotion on his face. His grandfather had taught him that real fighters never gloated or bragged after winning a fight. Violence was a tool to be used only when necessary and never for pleasure or revenge. Anthony was still backing away from the twins, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. He had trained in martial arts for 6 years and thought he understood fighting. But what Marcus and Michael had just done was beyond anything he had learned in any dojo. The wooden sword lay forgotten 20 feet away where it had landed after Michael disarmed him. Anthony could not even remember how it had been taken from his hands. 1 second, he was holding a weapon and feeling powerful. The next second, he was empty-handed and helpless. Carlos was starting to wake up from being choked unconscious. He sat up slowly, holding his head and trying to remember what had happened. The last thing he recalled was reaching for Michael. Now he was lying on the cold asphalt with a terrible headache. Michael walked over and helped Carlos to his feet. There was no anger or hatred in his actions. He treated his former opponent with the same calm respect he showed everyone else. This confused Carlos even more than the physical defeat he had just suffered. "Who are you really?" Carlos asked, rubbing his sore neck. "You guys are not beginners. Nobody learns to fight like that in 3 weeks of basic classes. What are you hiding from everyone at the dojo?" The twins looked at each other and had one of their silent conversations. They had kept their secret for 5 years, but now it was becoming impossible to hide their true abilities. Too many people had seen what happened in the parking lot. Marcus helped Derek stand up and checked his injured arm. The paralysis would wear off in about an hour with no permanent damage. This was exactly what their grandfather had taught them. Use only enough force to stop the threat without causing lasting harm. "We have been training since we were 11 years old," Marcus finally said. "Our grandfather was in the military and taught us how to fight before we ever walked into this dojo. We came here to learn discipline, not fighting techniques." Derek, Anthony, and Carlos listened in amazement as the twins explained their background. Sergeant Robert Johnson had served in special forces and later trained soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Every summer vacation, he had taught his grandsons deadly skills that most people never learned. The twins had mastered boxing, wrestling, judo, and street fighting by the time they were 15 years old. They could disable armed adults and fight multiple opponents at the same time. But their grandfather had made them promise to never use violence unless they had absolutely no other choice. "That is why we pretended to be clumsy beginners," Michael explained. "We did not want anyone to know how dangerous we really are. We just wanted to attend classes quietly and maybe make some friends without any drama or fighting." Anthony shook his head in disbelief. You mean all those times I threw you around during sparring practice, you were just letting it happen? You could have hurt me any time you wanted, but you chose not to fight back. Michael nodded. Our grandfather taught us that the strongest fighters are the ones who know when not to fight. Real martial arts is about protecting people, not hurting them. We only defended ourselves tonight because you gave us no other choice. Derek was starting to get some feeling back in his arm. The strange numbness was slowly wearing off, just as Marcus had predicted. He flexed his fingers and was relieved to discover that no permanent damage had been done. I do not understand, Derek said. If you are so skilled, why did you join a beginner class? Why not go straight to the advanced levels and show everyone what you can do? Because showing off makes you a target, Marcus replied. Our grandfather always said that smart fighters keep their abilities secret until they absolutely need them. The most dangerous people are often the ones who look the most harmless. Carlos was fully awake now and listening to every word. He thought about all the times he had made fun of the twins for being weak and clumsy. Now he realized they had been watching him the whole time, studying his moves and learning his weaknesses. The 3 black belts looked embarrassed and ashamed. They had tried to bully 2 people who could have seriously hurt them at any time. Instead of fighting back, the twins had shown restraint and mercy, even when being attacked with weapons. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos began to understand that they had been taught a valuable lesson about judging people by their appearance. The quiet, skinny brothers they had dismissed as easy targets were actually the most skilled fighters any of them had ever met. Word of what happened in the parking lot would spread quickly through the dojo. Other students would want to know how 2 beginners had defeated 3 black belts so easily. The twins' secret was about to become public knowledge, whether they wanted it to or not. By Friday morning, everyone at Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy had heard some version of what happened in the parking lot. The story grew bigger and more dramatic with each telling. Some students said the twins had beaten up 20 black belts. Others claimed they had used secret ninja weapons. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos tried to control the rumors, but it was too late. They had told a few friends the real story, and those friends had told other people. Soon the entire dojo was buzzing with excitement about the mysterious Johnson brothers. Some students did not believe the stories at all. How could 2 clumsy beginners defeat experienced black belts, they asked. It had to be some kind of joke or misunderstanding. But others remembered how strangely the twins moved during sparring practice. Sensei Williams heard the rumors and called Marcus and Michael into his private office before the evening class started. The instructor was confused and concerned about what had really happened between his students outside the dojo. I need you boys to tell me the truth about what occurred last night, Sensei Williams said in a serious voice. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos are claiming they were attacked by you 2 in the parking lot. But their story does not make sense to me. The twins sat quietly for a moment, looking at each other. They had hoped to keep their background secret, but now realized that was no longer possible. Too many people knew something unusual had happened and wanted answers. Marcus spoke first, explaining how Derek and his friends had been bullying them for weeks. He described the threats in the locker room and the attempted ambush in the parking lot. He made it clear that the twins had only defended themselves when attacked. Then Michael revealed their training background. He told Sensei Williams about their grandfather and the 5 years of intensive combat instruction they had received. The instructor listened with growing amazement as the full truth came out. Sensei Williams asked them to demonstrate some of their techniques. Marcus and Michael were reluctant, but finally agreed to show a few basic moves. What they demonstrated in the next 10 minutes left their instructor speechless with shock. The twins moved with a fluid grace that took decades to develop. Their techniques were precise and devastating, but also perfectly controlled. They could strike vital points to cause temporary paralysis or permanent damage depending on their intent. These are not traditional karate moves, Sensei Williams said after watching their demonstration. Where did your grandfather learn to fight like this? I have been studying martial arts for 30 years and have never seen anything like it. Grandpa Johnson learned from many different teachers, Michael explained. He studied boxing in the military judo in Japan and street fighting from veterans of real wars. Then he combined everything into his own system that he taught to Special Forces soldiers. The instructor realized he had two of the most skilled young fighters he had ever met sitting in his office. Their abilities far exceeded those of his black belt students and probably surpassed his own skills as well. This created a difficult situation for the dojo. Word was already spreading that the Johnson twins had easily defeated 3 black belts. Other students were asking questions and demanding to see proof of their abilities. Some parents were calling to ask if their children were safe training with such dangerous students. Sensei Williams had to make a decision about what to do next. He could ask the twins to leave the dojo to avoid more problems, or he could find a way to use their skills to benefit all of his students. The choice would affect everyone at Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos were also facing difficult choices. They could continue to be angry about their defeat and cause more trouble, or they could admit their mistakes and try to learn from the twins who had shown them mercy when they deserved punishment. The 3 black belts met privately after class to discuss their options. They were embarrassed about losing to supposed beginners, but also impressed by the skills they had witnessed. None of them had ever seen fighting techniques like the ones Marcus and Michael had used. "Maybe we should apologize," Anthony suggested. "We started this whole thing by trying to bully them when they never did anything wrong to us. They could have seriously hurt us, but chose not to cause permanent damage." Derek was having trouble accepting that he had been so completely outclassed by someone he had considered weak. His pride was hurt, and part of him wanted revenge. But he also knew that seeking more conflict with the twins would be extremely dangerous. Carlos was the first to make peace. He approached Michael the next day and asked to shake hands. He admitted that he had been wrong to try to intimidate the twins and said he was sorry for his behavior over the past few weeks. Michael accepted the apology gracefully and even offered to help Carlos improve his defensive techniques. This gesture of friendship after being attacked surprised Carlos and made him realize how mature and honorable the twins really were. Soon other students were approaching Marcus and Michael with questions about their training. Everyone wanted to know how they had learned to fight so well and whether they could teach others the same techniques. The twins found themselves becoming celebrities at the dojo instead of the invisible beginners they had hoped to remain. Their secret was completely exposed, and their quiet, peaceful time at Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy was over forever. But maybe this change would turn out to be a good thing. Instead of hiding their abilities, they could now use them to help other students learn better self-defense. Their grandfather had always said that knowledge should be shared with people who would use it responsibly. Sensei Williams spent the weekend thinking about what to do with Marcus and Michael. The rumors about their fighting skills were getting out of control. Some students were scared to train with them, while others wanted to challenge them to prove the stories were true. On Monday morning, the instructor made an announcement that surprised everyone at the dojo. Instead of asking the twins to leave or trying to hide what had happened, he decided to organize a formal demonstration. This would let everyone see the truth and put an end to all the wild rumors. "We will have special sparring matches this Friday evening," Sensei Williams told his students. "Marcus and Michael Johnson will demonstrate their abilities against volunteer opponents in controlled conditions. This will be educational for everyone and show what real martial arts looks like." Derek, Anthony, and Carlos immediately volunteered to participate. They wanted a chance to redeem themselves after their embarrassing defeat in the parking lot. Other black belt students also raised their hands, eager to test themselves against the mysterious twins. The twins were not happy about this public display. They had hoped to keep their abilities secret and train quietly without drawing attention. But their instructor explained that the demonstration was necessary to restore order and respect at the dojo. "Your grandfather called me this morning," Sensei Williams told them privately. "I explained the situation, and he agreed that showing your skills publicly is better than letting rumors and fear divide the students. He said you should accept this challenge." Sergeant Johnson had given his permission over the phone after hearing about the recent problems. He told his grandsons that running away from challenges only made situations worse. Sometimes you had to prove your abilities to earn proper respect from others. Word of the upcoming demonstration spread quickly beyond the dojo. Parents and friends of students wanted to attend to see what all the excitement was about. Local martial artists from other schools also asked permission to watch the matches. By Friday evening, the normally quiet dojo was packed with more than 100 spectators. Folding chairs had been set up around the main training area. People were talking excitedly and placing bets on what would happen during the demonstrations. Marcus and Michael sat quietly in the corner trying to stay calm before their public debut. They had spent the week practicing with each other to make sure they could control their techniques properly. Their grandfather had warned them to use only enough force to win without seriously injuring anyone. Derek was stretching and warming up on the other side of the room. He had trained extra hard all week preparing for his rematch with Marcus. This time, he was determined to show everyone that his earlier defeat had been just a lucky accident. Anthony and Carlos were also getting ready for their second chance against the twins. They had studied videos of famous martial artists and learned new techniques specifically for this demonstration. Both black belts were confident they could perform better in a controlled match. Sensei Williams called for attention and explained the rules to everyone present. These would be 3-minute rounds with full protective equipment. Points would be scored for clean techniques and good control. The matches would be stopped immediately if anyone was in danger of serious injury. The first match was Michael versus Anthony. Both fighters entered the ring wearing headgear, chest protectors, and thick gloves. The crowd fell silent as they faced each other and bowed respectfully before beginning to fight. Anthony started aggressively just as he had during their parking lot encounter. He threw a series of hard punches and kicks trying to overwhelm Michael with superior size and strength. The spectators could see that he was much more muscular and powerful than his smaller opponent. But once again, Michael seemed to flow around the attacks like water moving past rocks. He never blocked directly, but instead redirected Anthony's force and used it against him. Within 30 seconds, Anthony was breathing hard while Michael looked completely relaxed. The crowd began to murmur as they watched Michael score point after point with techniques so fast they were difficult to follow. Anthony became more desperate and started throwing wild haymaker punches that left him off balance and vulnerable. Michael could have ended the fight quickly with any of the devastating techniques his grandfather had taught him. Instead, he chose to demonstrate perfect control and sportsmanship. He scored enough points to win clearly while never hurting his opponent or making him look foolish. When the referee raised Michael's hand in victory, the audience erupted in applause. Even people who had bet against the twins were impressed by the skill and restraint they had witnessed. Anthony shook Michael's hand and admitted publicly that he had been completely outclassed. The second match featured Marcus against Derek. The bigger boy had learned from watching the first fight and tried to be more patient and defensive. But Marcus demonstrated an even wider range of techniques that left the spectators amazed. Derek found himself being led around the ring like he was dancing with an invisible partner. Every time he tried to attack, Marcus was already moving to counter. Every time he tried to defend, Marcus had already found a new angle of approach. The fight ended with Derek flat on his back after a perfectly executed throw that sent him flying through the air. He landed safely thanks to Marcus' perfect control, but everyone could see that the twin could have caused serious damage if he had chosen to do so. By the end of the evening, it was clear to everyone present that Marcus and Michael Johnson were extraordinary martial artists. Their skills were far beyond anything normally seen at a local dojo. The twins had proven themselves while showing perfect sportsmanship and control. The packed dojo fell completely silent as Marcus and Derek faced each other in the center of the mat. This was the rematch everyone had been waiting for. Derek had spent the entire week preparing for this moment and was determined to prove that his parking lot defeat had been just a fluke. Derek started more carefully this time. He had watched Michael's fight against Anthony and learned that rushing in with wild attacks would only lead to another embarrassing loss. Instead, he circled slowly looking for the perfect opening to strike. Marcus moved like he was floating on air. His feet barely seemed to touch the ground as he mirrored Derek's movement, staying just out of range of any sudden attacks. The crowd could see that he was completely relaxed, while Derek was tense and nervous. After 30 seconds of careful circling, Derek finally committed to an attack. He threw a lightning-fast combination of punches that would have knocked out most opponents. But Marcus was no longer where the punches were aimed. He had somehow slipped to the side without anyone seeing him move. Derek spun around looking for his target and found Marcus standing calmly behind him. The twin had moved so smoothly that it looked like magic to the watching spectators. Several people in the audience gasped in amazement at what they had just witnessed. The black belt student tried again with a powerful roundhouse kick that he had been perfecting for 3 years. This was his best technique and had never failed to score against any opponent he had faced. But once again, Marcus seemed to vanish just before the kick arrived. This time, Marcus reappeared next to Derek and gently touched his shoulder. It was barely a tap, but Derek immediately lost his balance and stumbled forward. The crowd realized that Marcus could have struck him with devastating force, but had chosen to show mercy instead. Derek was getting frustrated and started throwing wilder attacks. He forgot all about technique and strategy as his anger took control. This was exactly what Marcus had been waiting for. Angry fighters made mistakes that could be easily exploited by someone with proper training. The end came quickly and dramatically. Derek launched himself through the air with a flying kick that should have been impossible to avoid. But Marcus caught his leg effortlessly and used Derek's own momentum to send him spinning across the mat. Derek landed hard on his back with a loud thud that echoed through the silent dojo. He lay there for several seconds trying to catch his breath and figure out what had just happened. The throw had been so perfectly executed that he was not seriously injured despite the spectacular fall. Marcus walked over and helped Derek to his feet, showing the same respect and kindness he had demonstrated all evening. The crowd erupted in applause as they realized they had just witnessed something truly special. But the demonstration was not over yet. Sensei Williams had saved the most impressive match for last. Marcus and Michael would fight together against Derek Anthony Carlos and 2 other black belt volunteers. This 5-against-2 match would be the ultimate test of their abilities. The 5 black belts spread out around the twins, trying to surround them and attack from all directions at once. This was a dangerous situation that required perfect teamwork and timing to survive. Most martial artists would be overwhelmed by so many skilled opponents. But Marcus and Michael had been training for scenarios like this since they were children. They moved together like they shared a single mind controlling 2 bodies. When one twin ducked low, the other would strike high. When one moved left, the other would flow right. The 5 black belts found themselves fighting shadows that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Every attack they launched was turned against them by fighters who moved with impossible coordination and precision. Within 2 minutes, 3 of the black belts were on the ground, breathing hard and unable to continue. The remaining 2, Derek and Anthony, were backing away with their hands raised in surrender. They had never experienced anything like this level of skill and teamwork. The crowd was on their feet, cheering and applauding as the twins bowed respectfully to their defeated opponents. What they had just witnessed was beyond anything they had ever seen in martial arts movies or competitions. Parents who had been worried about their children training with dangerous students now understood that Marcus and Michael were actually the safest training partners anyone could have. Their control was so perfect that they could defeat anyone without causing injury. Other martial arts instructors in the audience were asking Sensei Williams if they could bring their students to learn from the twins. Word was already spreading through the local fighting community about the incredible demonstration they had just witnessed. Derek Anthony and Carlos approached the twins after the matches ended. Instead of being angry or jealous about their defeats, they wanted to shake hands and ask for advice. They had learned more about real martial arts in one evening than in years of regular training. The demonstration had accomplished exactly what Sensei Williams had hoped. All the rumors and fears were replaced by respect and admiration. The twins were no longer mysterious threats, but inspirational examples of what martial arts could achieve with proper dedication and training. Marcus and Michael had successfully proven their abilities while maintaining the humble, respectful attitude their grandfather had taught them. They had won the respect of everyone present without making enemies or causing lasting injuries to their opponents. The Monday morning after the demonstration brought a completely different atmosphere to Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. Students who had previously ignored or looked down on Marcus and Michael now approached them with genuine respect and curiosity about their training methods. Derek was the first to make a real apology. He found Marcus before class started and looked him directly in the eyes as he spoke. "I was wrong about everything," he said. "I thought being tough meant hurting people who seemed weaker than me. You showed me that real strength is about protecting others and staying in control." Marcus accepted the apology gracefully and offered to help Derek improve his defensive techniques. This surprised everyone who expected the twins to hold grudges after being bullied for so many weeks. Instead, they treated their former enemies like potential friends who had simply made mistakes. Anthony and Carlos also approached the twins with requests to learn from them. They admitted that their previous attitudes had been wrong and asked for guidance on becoming better martial artists. The brothers agreed to share some of their grandfather's teachings with anyone who was genuinely interested in learning. Sensei Williams asked Marcus and Michael to assist with advanced classes twice a week. He recognized that their unique training could benefit all his students if shared properly. The twins accepted but insisted on focusing on defensive techniques and mental discipline rather than aggressive fighting methods. The first lesson they taught was about awareness and patience. Most students wanted to learn flashy techniques that would impress their friends. But the twins explained that real martial arts started with understanding yourself and your surroundings before you ever threw a punch or kick. They demonstrated how to read an opponent's body language and predict attacks before they happened. This was not magic, but careful observation combined with years of practice. Students learned to watch for tiny signals that revealed when someone was about to strike. The second lesson focused on using minimum force to achieve maximum results. Marcus and Michael showed how redirecting an attacker's energy was more effective than trying to overpower them with brute strength. Even small students could defeat larger opponents using proper technique and timing. These lessons attracted students from other martial arts schools who wanted to learn the twins' methods. Sensei Williams allowed visitors to attend special seminars where Marcus and Michael shared their grandfather's philosophy about responsible fighting. The twins emphasized that their most important lesson was knowing when not to fight. They explained that avoiding unnecessary conflict was always better than winning through violence. Real martial artists used their skills to protect people, not to show off or settle personal disputes. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos became some of their most dedicated students. The three former bullies worked hard to change their attitudes and learn better ways to handle conflicts. They began helping younger students instead of intimidating them. The entire culture of the dojo improved over the following months. Bullying incidents disappeared completely as students learned to respect quiet strength over loud aggression. The twins had shown that the most dangerous fighters were often the most peaceful people. Parents who had been concerned about their children's safety now praised the positive changes at Dragon Phoenix Martial Arts Academy. The school became known throughout the city as a place where students learned character development along with fighting skills. Marcus and Michael finally found the community they had been searching for. They were no longer outsiders trying to fit in, but respected teachers who helped others grow. Their mother was proud to see them using their abilities to make the world a little bit better. The twins still maintained their humble attitudes and continued learning from Sensei Williams and their grandfather. They understood that martial arts was a lifelong journey of self-improvement that never really ended. There would always be new challenges and opportunities to grow. 6 months after their first day at the dojo, Marcus and Michael had completely transformed the school's environment. Students who used to settle disputes with their fists now talked through their problems. Respect and kindness replaced fear and intimidation as the dominant values. Other martial arts schools began sending their instructors to observe classes at Dragon Phoenix Academy. The twins' influence was spreading throughout the local fighting community as more people learned about their grandfather's teachings. Derek, Anthony, and Carlos became examples of how bullies could change when shown better ways to earn respect.